All right, we're live. Anything you're saying can and will be used against you in a Sanhedrin of law. This is Rabbi Tobin at B'nai Shalom in West Orange, New Jersey, with our Monday Talmud class. Today is the 16th of December, 2019. And we are taking a little break from Sanhedrin to study the Gemara on Hanukkah. For those who wish to look it up, we're at the about the middle top of Tractate Shabbat, page 21b. So 21b, for the packets that I've just handed out to you, the Gemara is on the front and back of page 1, and I have happily marked for you in the Hebrew text lines with numbers, which correspond to lines with numbers that I've marked in the English. So if you wish to go back and forth, here you go, Ron. If you wish to go back and forth between the Hebrew and the English, you're welcome to. Otherwise, since we're using the Schottenstein from Art Scroll as our core translation, the Hebrew is embedded. Okay, so a couple of words of introduction. Hanukkah happens long after the final books of the Tanakh are written, redacted, edited, combined, preserved, hallowed, etc., etc., etc. So there is no Hanukkah in the Jewish Bible because it happened after our Bible was done. It did, however, happen long before our Mishnah. So these are events that are well known to the rabbis of the Mishnah. And what may be a shocking surprise to you, Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Mishnah at all. Not even sideways. Hanukkah does not exist in the Mishnah. So you might ask yourself, why? So one answer is the infighting of the Jewish people. And that theory would have to explain that the rabbis of the Mishnah somehow are opposed to the teaching of Hanukkah. I'm not going to adopt that strong a point of view along those lines. I would say there's a lesser view, which is the rabbis of the Mishnah did not consider Hanukkah to be as important as all of the other things that are in the Mishnah. So you could either leave it out because it's irrelevant, you could leave it out because it's not as important, or you can leave it out because you're opposed to it. But any of these would be an argument from silence, and you can't tell me which it is. Okay? Historical context is that Hanukkah is the celebration of the Hasmonean dynasty. So if you want to enter the realm of politics, which you must immediately, if you're talking about the late Greek and the Roman period in the land of Israel, everything is politics. The kingdoms are political. The Hasmonean kingdom, which throws out Greek rule and rules until the coming of Rome, was a political kingdom. There's no point where it says, and God's cloud came down on the mountain when the Hasmonean king sat upon the throne. Right? There is nothing divine about the Hasmonean kingdom. The Maccabees did what the Maccabees did. They engaged in war. Some of it was war against external forces. Some of it was war against internal collaborators and assimilationists. And if you read the first two books of Maccabees, which chronicle all of this very well, it says exactly who they were and what they did. If you read Josephus as a secondary opposing source of history from this time, he confirms the stories that are found in the first two books of Maccabees. So our primary two source materials are accurate, believable, and complete for who the Maccabees were. They fought external as well as internal. That means a revolutionary war as well as a civil war to assert Torah rule in their day according to their interpretations. In the book of Maccabees, they cleanse the Temple Mount, they purify the Temple Mount, and they inaugurate a week of celebration and feasting And the book of Maccabees says the reason they do this as an 8-day holiday to be celebrated at this time of year for all future generations with the singing of Hallel, the eschewing or avoiding of sorrow, not even giving eulogies, that this is a national day of celebration for Jews everywhere in the world. They make it an 8-day holiday, and they say explicitly the reason is because they were not able to do Sukkot that year. And Sukkot with Shmini Atzeret is an 8-day holiday. And so because they couldn't do Sukkot, because it was in the hands of the heathens, they purify the temple and inaugurate divine worship again and institute 8 days in Kislev because they couldn't do Sukkot. Very clear. Yes.
So Sukkot should have been a few weeks earlier, but it's the same.
Sukkot should have happened right after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But at that time, the temple was in the hands of the heathens with idols in it and impurities on it, and the temple was unusable. So they
kind of like a belated Sukkot.
Exactly like a belated Sukkot. It's like Sukkot Sheni. Because the temple was impure and we were unable to observe, we are going to do it now in great celebration, and we're going to declare to the people around the world, the Jewish communities everywhere, that this is a time that we should all be celebrating. And it does not use the language because of the great miracle that God did for us here. Just because of our victory, and here we are. Okay? Yes?
Where do we pick up the miracle of lights?
So the question is, where do we pick up the miracle of lights? The miracle of the oil.
Yeah.
The story of the oil does not exist in either the book of Maccabees or the story as related by Josephus. None of the historical texts within 300 years of the events of the Maccabees mention the miracle of oil. Again, now we have a silence problem. They don't mention them because it was irrelevant, because it wasn't as important as the stuff they wrote down, or because they were opposed to the concept in the story, or it's completely unknown to anybody. Nobody ever heard of such a miracle. Later on, people write that down. It's a later midrash. All right? Those are all potentials. Could there have been a cruise of oil that there was blah, 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 and it's just not in the sources? Sure. I watched the news all week long about the anti-Semitic attack against a kosher store in Jersey City. And if I were to watch the news and only take the official reports that I've seen, I would think that there was a shootout with criminals. And the concept that it was an anti-Semitic attack aimed specifically at killing Jews doesn't seem to be on the newspapers or in the television. So maybe the chroniclers of the event are opposed to calling it that, are ignorant of calling it that, are unaware of those concepts, or it's just not as important to them as the things they're saying. Chroniclers of events have biases, and those biases come through in what they choose to chronicle and how they chronicle and what they choose not to chronicle. So when you have silence, you need a lot of evidence if you have a theory about the silence. I will just note that there is silence regarding anything like a miracle of oil for at least 300 years from the time of Maccabees, and the Maccabees are fairly thorough in writing down the details of their conquests and all the things that went well and all of their high, wonderful things. It would seem consistent that if the Maccabees had witnessed such an event, they might have thought it was in their interest to write it down. But I don't know. It's an argument from silence. Yes? Right. The insertion in the Amidah for Hanukkah is the historic one according to the story of the book of Maccabees. And it is not the story that's in the Gemara. But that was added even later, 500 years after the Gemara. So the people who chose to put that in the Amidah knew the story in the Gemara and didn't put it in the Amidah. Why? Argument from silence. Right? Because they didn't like to rely on miracles, because they didn't, I don't know. Because they needed to empower us in a political way and say it's our ultimate victory that matters? Yes?
So for 70 years, the Kohanim, according to Dona, were out of power because of no temple. But the rabbis, because they were able to work in exile in Babylonia for those 70 years, were able to become more powerful. And so it looks like there is this tension now where the Kohanim are trying to come back and take back power that they had lost.
You mean in the Hasmonean kingdom?
Yeah.
So now you look at the Hasmonean kingdom. They obviously had their own kings, queens, and they had their own priests who were in the royal favor, who became the Kohen Gadol of this new sanctuary. There were other people who were on the outs. So Ron raises a possibility that in the vacuum, when the temple was not open to Torah worship Kohanim, that the rabbis perhaps were becoming powerful. The only problem is that historically this would have been the age of the earliest of the Zugot, the study partners that create the stream of Talmud. So we really don't have rabbis that precede the Hasmonean kingdom. We don't. There's no rabbinic movement. They kind of come along at the same time, and there's conflict between Shimon ben Shetach and the others and the house of the Hasmoneans, and there's actually a point where there's bloodshed, where the Hasmoneans slaughter a bunch of the rabbis, historical fact, because of the conflict that's between us. So then the legacy of that is the Hasmoneans later, another king arises who's more favorable, the queen actually is Salome, who is more favorable to the rabbis, and there's some marrying of rabbis and so forth, and so they're kind of in, kind of out. But the concept that the rabbis are ambivalent about the Hasmoneans being a good thing, I think there's a lot of basis in historical fact for why they might think that they don't want to celebrate everything Hasmonean. They're glad to have the temple, they're glad we're in Jewish hands, I mean, there's a lot of good going on. Hanukkah would have been the political celebration of the Hasmonean house in the time of the Hasmonean house. Those who are not happy with the Hasmonean house would be like Democrats attending a Republican rally, right? They would have sat through it gritting their teeth every step of the way. Well, we're so glad that, like look at it right now. I love my retirement fund right now, right? So I know a lot of people out there who are economically doing really well. But then when it comes time to look at the leadership of the country, may have a different feeling. And so they might grit their teeth through the fact that they're doing well, but they hate what's going on, or it might be the reverse. Somebody might have, people don't always vocalize their ambivalence. If things are going well, life might be messy, life might be murky, there might be a lot of overlapping gray zones. I think at the time of the Hasmonean house and the early rabbis, there's a lot of gray zones. So the early rabbinic movement does not celebrate Hanukkah. Hanukkah shows up in a couple of texts. There's a text that's of the age of the Mishnah that talks about when you fast and when you don't fast, and when you do eulogies, when you don't do eulogies. Hanukkah's on that list. That doesn't make it into the Mishnah. So we know that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi must have known that text because he quotes it and uses it in Sefer Tanit, but he doesn't bring that line out of it. So again, argument from silence. Yeah. The Greeks? Yes, the Greeks in every civilization before and after, when you have a big military victory, you thank the gods and have a celebration and a ticker-tape parade and slaughter a few animals and give gifts to the poor and release people from prison, and there's all kinds of ancient norms, right? That's where we get presidential pardon power from, right? On the strength of the leader, he gets to dispense mercy and all this kind of stuff, right? That exists in society. That it would be natural the Maccabees would have done that. It's not at all surprising. The question is, why is it 8 days? What did they say they were celebrating? And where's God and the miracle? Because today, Hanukkah is the festival of lights and the story of the miracle of the oil and God's, right, redemption or salvation of our people through the forces of the Maccabees at that time. That second layer of theology and miracle is not present in the Maccabees' own story. That's all I'm saying. The reason I bring this up is not because I'm coming in here to ruin the holiday for you and to be some atheist of the conservative movement. I'm not. I believe all of these things might have happened. They're all compatible with each other. But the Gemara knows these problems. And the Gemara has places where if you know that background, and you don't just know the Bubba Mitzvah Children's Religious School Sunday morning story, but you know the rest of it, the Gemara makes more sense. And you can't understand the Gemara without understanding what I just said. And to try and take a simple, pious read of everything, it belies what they're talking about. All right, so let's dive in. Where I have number 1, it's a Tanu Rabbanan, Mitzvat Chanukah. Okay, so why are we in chapter 2 of Shabbat? The tractate is Shabbat, and chapter 2 is B'mei Madlikin. What types of candles and wicks are we allowed to use for lighting Shabbat candles? So that's where this shows up in the Talmud. Because there's no tractate on Hanukkah, because there's no Mishnah on Hanukkah. So since Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did not put Hanukkah in the Mishnah, there's going to be no place in the Talmud that's going to be reading a Mishnah about Hanukkah that they can talk about Hanukkah. So they have to find a different place to start talking about Hanukkah. So they chose the place where they're talking about candles. So that already tells you that the editor of the Talmud associates Hanukkah first and foremost with candles. Okay? Which is not what the Maccabees say is the primary observance. Okay? So the editor of the Talmud already has bought into the concept that the primary observance of Hanukkah is candles, which means the primary symbol of the holiday is light, which means the primary cause of that celebration is the lights, which of course is going to be the miracle of the oil. So by the time the Talmud has organized all this material, it is clear Hanukkah is about the miracle of the oil and the lighting of lights. All right? That's the end of the story, as Paul Harvey would tell us. Pass this down, please. Welcome. Okay. So that's why it shows up in this tractate. What's it going to say? The first question is going to be Hanukkah light or Hanukkah lights. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. What is ner? Single, candle. Blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who sanctified us with commanded us to light the Hanukkah light. Singular. Every single translation in English I have ever seen says, light the Hanukkah lights, plural, which is the wrong translation of the bracha. The bracha is commanded to light the Hanukkah light, singular. How many candles are you required to light for Hanukkah each night?
1.
1 is the correct answer. On the first night, 1. On the second night, 1. On the third night, 1. On the eighth night, 1. You are commanded to light 1 candle each night of Hanukkah. Why do we not? Why do we do this whole other thing? Let's take a look at it. So this is the first question, because they know you're only commanded to light 1, and they know they light more than 1. So that's the first question in the Gemara. Yeah, Bonnie.
Oh, there's also, I was looking, it says 1 for the men's household.
Well, we haven't read it yet.
Okay.
You've been reading ahead. Evidently, I was boring in the first 5 minutes. You found something more interesting. Here we go. So the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, Mitzvah Chanukah ner ish uveito. 1 light for a man and his entire household. The hamehadrin, and those who try and do hidur mitzvah, who make mitzvot as beautiful as possible, mehadrin, it says here pursue mitzvot, but that's wrong, is ner lechol achad ve'achad, a candle for each member of his household. So if you have 4 people in the house, how many candles do you light on the first night? 4. How many do you light on the second night? 4. How many on the third night? 4. Your son goes back to college. How many do you light on the next night? 3. 2 cousins come to visit you. How many do you light on the next night? 5. 1 for each person in the household is the second shita, or the second approach given in this Baraita. This is not the halacha. We all know how to light Hanukkah candles, so don't go home and start doing things differently. We'll find our own practice here in a little while, but let the Gemara do what it does. Yeah.
Some families have a tradition of each person lights a Hanukkah menorah.
So now that I'm lighting 9 candles on the 8th night, but I have 20 people in the house, I need to have 180 candles burning so that each person can have their own 9
In
candles.
the fire extinguisher.
Obviously, that would be a conflation of different approaches, right? And or a conflagration of different approaches. Oh.
Turn off the smoke detector.
But yes, that's what we do in my house. Everybody has their own full Hanukkah, right? And they're all lighting the numbers that we light that night. Okay, I mean, by the time you get through 6th grade, they've made 5 of them in religious school anyway. You're asking about the shamas and the extra candle and lighting, and that's in here too. Let's start like we know nothing. All right, let's presume you've never heard of Hanukkah before, and this is the first you've ever heard of it. Don't bring anything you know into the conversation, okay? All right. The mahadrin min ha-mahadrin, and the ones who want to make it beautiful beyond beautiful, most fervently pursue this mitzvah. Beit Shammai omrim, Yom Rishon madlik shmona. Beit Shammai says on the first night you light 8 candles. Mikan ve'elach pochet v'holech, and each day 1 less. Uveit Hillel omrim Yom Rishon madlik echad, but Hillel says you light 1 on the first day. Mikan ve'elach mosif v'holech, and each day you add another to it. So Shammai has you light 8 on the first night, 7 on the second, 6 on the, and down to none, down to 1 on the last night. And Hillel starts with 1 and goes up. So we have Hillel, Shammai with opposite opinions. Obviously, we're going to need to deal with that. Okay? Amar Ula. So Ula says, Pliga Beitzrei Amore b'Ma'arava, 2 of the great Amorim in the west, meaning this is after the time of Yehuda Nasi, and they're in the west, which is where? The land of Israel, because Talmud comes from Iraq, and so the west of Iraq is Israel. Okay? So 2 Amorim in the west disagree about this dispute between Shammai and Hillel. So now we're going to hear 2 guys with 2 interpretations of the 2 opinions of Shammai and Hillel. So you're going to wind up with more than 2 things to think about. Okay? So Yossi bar Avin and Yossi bar Zveda are the 2 guys. Chad amar Tama devei Shammai. One said that Shammai's reason for going from 8 down to 1 is Keneged Yamim Hanich Nasim, is because of the remaining number of days to come. So you have 8 days to go, you have 7 days to go, you have 6 days to go, you have 5 days to go. That's why he does it. V'tamei devei Hillel, and the reason for Hillel saying that you go up each and every time is Keneged Yamim Hayotzim, because of the days that are still coming, right? You start with 1, and then it's a 2, and then it's a 3. How many days have you had? Right? So you've had 1 day, you've had 2 days, you've had 3 days, you've had 4 days, and that's why they count. Okay? So that's one guy's interpretation of Hillel and Shammai. The Chadamar, and the other guy says that Tamei devei Shammai, Shammai's reason is Keneged Parei Achag, that the reason Shammai starts with 8 and goes down every day is because it's like the sacrifices given on Sukkot. Now you know why I talked to you about why the Maccabees said they're making Hanukkah 8 days because they couldn't do Sukkot. So if you're trying to make Hanukkah like Sukkot, the holidays, if you look at your Musaf Amidah on Sukkot, or the Torah reading for the Maftir on Sukkot, on the first day of Sukkot, there's like 40 bulls that are offered. And then on the next day less, and the next day less, and the next day less, and on Shmini Atzeret, a single bull is offered. So each day of Sukkot, there are fewer and fewer and fewer animals sacrificed for the days. So if you're making Hanukkah like Sukkot and you're doing that by lighting candles, it would make sense to pattern it after the sacrifices and to do the biggest number on the first day and less and less and less until you get down to 1 on the 8th day, just like Shmini Atzeret had 1. It's a very logical interpretation, right? V'tamei devei Hillel, and that guy says that Hillel says, well, Hillel can't, what's Hillel going to do? It can't be about the sacrifices because that's a slam dunk argument if you're doing the sacrifice. It has to be a completely different reason, and it is. Demalin b'kodesh ve'ein moridim. We can always increase in holiness. We can never decrease in holiness. We can go up higher, higher, higher. We never go lower, lower, lower. So if you were to decrease the light each day, it's as if the holiness is getting less and less, as if the miracle is dwindling out. Your holiness and experience of God is dwindling as the days go on. You could never do that. You can only increase in holiness. And
Why do we usually sacrifice on
because the Torah says so. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the only thing you can say. So if, what would Hillel say to Ma'alim B'Kodesh Ve'ein Moridin with the number of sacrifices on Sukkot? He would have to say it doesn't apply. There's nothing else he can do. All right? Notice that the words that have been used to discuss the choices about all these candles are the Mehadrin, Mina Mehadrin, the people who are making it beautiful, the people who make it beautiful beyond beautiful, trying to find logical arguments, bringing in the category of holiness, increasing or decreasing. Has anybody talked about a miracle of oil yet? Nothing. I got nothing.
miracle of goats?
There's no miracle of goats either. If you've got to bring that many animals, trust me, it doesn't feel like a miracle.
And if everybody had their own herd of goats, can you imagine how that should smell at the end of the day?
Okay. All right. So here we go. So that's the discussion. How are we doing? Any surprises? All right. So now, Tanu Rabbanan, number 2. The rabbis taught, Ner Chanukah mitzvah lehanicha al petach beito. This question was asked last week. The mitzvah of Hanukkah, the requirement is to put it in the doorway of your house. Mi bachutz, so it's visible from the outside. Im hayad dar ba'aliyah, but if you lived on the upper floor of an apartment and you have no place or courtyard to put that Hanukkah light where it's outside your door, manicha b'chalon hasmucha l'reshut harabim. You have to put it in your window that faces the street outside, the public area. Uvishad ha-sakana, but in a time of danger, where perhaps lighting a fire or making your home visible in the dark could attract danger. Manicha al shulchano vidayo. You light it on the table in the middle of your home, and it's plenty good enough. Okay? And that's enough. All right, Amar Rava. Now Rava is going to look at that, and he's going to say, Tzarich ner acheret lehistamash laora. But you need a second light to light the light. All right, so now we're getting into your question about the shamas, okay? So you can't just have the light. So, if you light the light and it's on your dining room table and you sit down to dinner and it's nighttime, then you're using the Hanukkah light as your regular light. It's not really special. You're using it for a completely mundane purpose, to eat by, to sit by, to read by, to talk by, to live by, right? So it's now the light in your house. Remember, there's no electricity. People don't have 20 lamps going in their homes all night long. Nighttime was dark. You wouldn't light more than one light in a room. It's expensive. It burns out. It's just a waste. You would never have a light going in a room you're not in. I don't know if any of you remember, but I've got from my grandparents, I've got their little walking candlesticks. It's a candlestick in a larger round splash dish with a little loop handle on the side, so you can walk around in the house with your candle at night, right? Which is perfect for bidikat chametz. It's cute, but it wasn't cute. That was how you walked around without killing yourself at night, because you didn't have lights anywhere else. You had a light, right? And you took it with you when you walked around the house. They had no flashlights, no.
That was the flashlight.
That was the flashlight.
I can backtrack where the Hillel and the Shammai is going up or going down.
Okay,
But it doesn't really resolve it. It just says this school says that and that school says
correct.
that.
But Hillel gets the halacha.
I know he does, but I mean, it doesn't say that here.
The Gemara never tells you who gets the halacha. Almost never. I mean, it does sometimes, but almost never. We know Hillel gets the halacha. So that's the law. You start with one and you increase every day because ein moridim b'kodesh. So we accept that. Right. Shammai gets the halacha in the world to come. Don't be in a hurry. All right. Now, ve'ika medura lo tzarich, but if you have a medura, it says here a torch, but I don't really think that's correct. A medura is a lamp like a real lamp. So by my grandparents' time, this was the kerosene lantern, right? So you've got it. You can turn the little knob, and the wick goes up, and the light gets brighter. It's inside a glass that reflects it, so it's bright. You can really light the whole room with a single kerosene lantern for all practical purposes. If you have a fire in the hearth, or you have the other thing they had in rabbinic times is, have you ever seen an oil lamp? It's kind of in the shape of a little Aladdin's lamp. It's got a little thing sticking out like this, and you lay the wick on it, and the wick dips down into the reservoir of oil, and the light is actually hanging off of the tip of the Aladdin lamp thing, and it lights there, and it's pulling the oil out through the wick that way. So imagine that, only instead of it being an Aladdin's lamp, it's a bowl, and it's got like 10 or 12 of those spouts sticking out on all sides, with 10 or 12 wicks going into a large reservoir in the middle. That's a lamp. Okay, that's a madura. So in a more expensive home, if you could afford this, it's like a tabletop chandelier, right? Think of it that way, with multiple wicks around the one reservoir, and you could just pour oil in the middle to keep it going all the time. And this would have been quite a fancy thing, and it would have cast a fair amount of light. If you have one of those, right, then you don't need an extra light, a shamash, on your Hanukkah candle, because there's enough light in the room otherwise that you're not using this light for mundane purpose. Notice you're back to talking about a single light. So the whole Hillel Shammai thing was an interruption. And this is really continuing the first question about one light for him and his whole household, or one light for each person in the household. Skip Hillel Shammai and go right to the question, and do you need another light for that light if you only have one light for you in your household? Well, if you have a Madur or something else, then you don't. You see how that happens? The Hillel Shammai sugya was dropped in here. It's an interruption in the flow of the other two topics, because we're back to talking about a single light and therefore needing a second light. And the answer is, if you already have a second, third, fourth, or fifth light, you don't need a second light. So again, we're lighting one light for Hanukkah. Got it? And it wouldn't have been an 8-branched candelabra. It would have been a light, with a little oil lamp right there sitting on the table.
What light or a candle?
Oil light. All this stuff for them is oil
What
lights.
happened to the candles?
Ner means lamp. So it's only when you have candles. There's not as many plants that grow wax in the land of Israel as there are in the other places we've lived. So the concept of harvesting things and boiling them down and scooping the wax off the top and pouring it into a mold and having a wick solidify in it and taking it out of the mold so you have candles, they had olives. So they crushed olives. So the whole tractate of B'mei Madlikin in second chapter of Shabbat, of what do we light with, is talking about the wicks,
So,
not the wax of a candle.
so religiously, does it matter if you use oil or?
Oil is preferable, but as long as you're lighting a light that is a lamp, it's kosher.
Near has both concepts. The word near, both the candle and
The real default meaning of ner in the Talmud is an oil lamp. It comes to mean candles as well when candles became common. But they're not talking about candles. We'll translate it as candles, or we'll put the word candle in and all that, because that's our mechanism for it. But these would have been,
It's nice to know the historical evolution of the word.
yeah, ner means lamp, lamp meant oil.
And one, because in my neighborhood, there were people who put out oil.
Yes, definitely preferable. To do oil is preferable. Lighting a single candle is kosher. Okay. Well, you want it to be good quality oil so it burns cleanly. They talk about that in B'mei Madlikin for Shabbat. You don't want anything that's going to sputter or smoke, because then it ruins the holiness of Shabbat. So we would extend that to Hanukkah too. Okay, so where are we? V'i adam chashufu, and if you're a distinguished person, af al gav de'ika medura, even if you have this medura, tzarich ner acheret, you still need to do the additional light to indicate that the Hanukkah light is different, right? So you still have this additional light, because if you always have the menorah going, you can't like use the menorah to let the Hanukkah light off the hook. So you're going to have a second light, a shamash for the Hanukkah light. The logic falls apart, and thankfully they drop it. Number 3. Now we get a very interesting question. My Hanukkah. So the Gemara asks, what the heck is Hanukkah? That's a startling question. How can the Gemara be asking, what is Hanukkah? Don't they know? Well, they might be asking rhetorically so that they can answer their own question. Or they might be asking because there's no such thing as Hanukkah. It's not in the Torah. It's fine, it was a Hasmonean political celebration for a long time. The reason it wasn't in the Mishnah was because it didn't exist. And the rabbis of the Mishnah did not observe it. The rabbis of the Mishnah didn't put it in. It wasn't assumed to be an obligation for all the people. It's, I don't know, 4th of July, right? You may all be celebrating it, but that doesn't make it Jewish. Thanksgiving. Yeah, Christmas is, religiously you can't deal with it the same way. Well, the Thanksgiving, Labor Day, right? Martin Luther King Day. What are these days? Why are Jews not going to work? Right?
Would Hanukkah be in the Yerushalmi?
It's not in the Yerushalmi either. I think the B'mei Madlikin, I think that the whole Hillel Shammai thing and everything is not in the Jerusalem Talmud in chapter 2. I think there's some Hanukkah in there, but I don't think that sugi is in there, but I could be wrong. I have to look it up. I have it. I didn't look it up. But it's definitely expanded in Bavli. Like Bavli, and I think that makes sense because my theory is this. In the land of Israel, Hanukkah was a politically charged holiday. It identified you with one or another political party. And celebrating it meant you wanted the Hasmoneans back over Rome. And whether you wanted this royal house or that royal house would have been a political question. 200 years after the destruction, living in the land of Bavel, and even Rome has fallen to Christianity, nobody's thinking that we're getting the Hasmonean house back, or building a royal lineage in the land of Israel, or celebrating anybody's anything. It's simply, the Tories and the Whigs were all native-born Americans, right? So how dare we celebrate Independence Day when half of the country was opposed to Independence Day? 200 years later, who cares about Tories and Whigs? It's Independence Day. We celebrate 4th of July, right? So 200 years later in the land of Bavel, every story about Hanukkah is good. Every tradition is a miracle. Everything is observed by the entire nation, and nobody's bothered by it. So now in the Bavli, it's everybody's holiday. And the question is, my Hanukkah, basically not only what is Hanukkah, but why wasn't Hanukkah? What is it? We don't have sources. We've been teaching Chumash to the kids, and it's not in there. We teach Mishnah to the teenagers. It's not in there. We need to teach it. What is it? So it comes into the Bavli. And this is where it becomes a national, universal Jewish holiday, is right here where the Bavli says, my Hanukkah. What's Hanukkah? So this is the first source we have, other than the Maccabees' own point of view, that this should be for everybody. And Ditnan Rabbanan, because the rabbis taught, on the 25th of Kislev, the days of Hanukkah begin. They are 8 in all, on which it is not permitted to eulogize or to fast, because when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they contaminated all the oil that was in the sanctuary, and when the royal Hasmonean house gained the upper hand and vanquished them, the Hasmoneans searched, and they found only 1 flask of oil that was lying with the Kohen Gadol's seal on it, and it contained only enough to kindle for 1 day, and a miracle was performed with the oil, and they kindled it for 8 days. And in the following year, the Hasmoneans established and rendered these festival days with respect to Hallel and Thanksgiving. And so with the introduction that I gave you, you can now understand what that paragraph means. Okay? So now we have a tradition that says it's a baraita. Very interesting. Because this tradition says it's a baraita. What does that mean? This tradition says that this is of the age of the Mishnah. There's an authoritative teaching from the time of the Mishnah that claims the miracle of the oil. We have no other source claiming this story from that time period. So when they said Tanu Rabbanan, in the Gemara later, is that because it's Tanu Rabbanan or because they're saying Tanu Rabbanan? Is it really a Baraita or are they claiming it's a Baraita? It would seem that they may be claiming it's a Baraita. But in any event, we'll call it a Baraita. Schottenstein puts it in all caps, so we have to believe that because that's Torah Misinai.
So we do a full Hallel.
We do Hallel and we're not supposed to do eulogies.
Yeah, okay, but it's not a half Hallel.
It's a full Hallel all 8 days.
Yeah,
Whereas Pesach is only full Hallel on the first 2 days. And Sukkot is only full Hallel. No, Sukkot is full Hallel throughout. Yes, throughout. Because Hanukkah is patterned after Sukkot. Sukkot is full Hallel, therefore Hanukkah is full Hallel.
Even though there's no Musaf.
But there's no Musaf. Because there's no additional sacrifice.
I think that's a funny coincidence. The 25th Kislev starts Hanukkah, 25th December is Christmas.
That's pure coincidence,
It
yes.
is, so that's when it is.
25th of Christmas, 25th of Kislev.
Come on, some people say there's no Christmas.
Nah, it's pure coincidence. It's pure coincidence.
Okay, sometimes it's not. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, the date of Christmas wasn't set until much later in Christianity. Like the first 2 centuries of Christianity didn't have Christmas. Maybe. I doubt it. They were burning the Talmud the time they set that date, so I'm not sure. Okay. Gemara is now going to try and derive a Hanukkah law from a Mishnah that talks about a completely different topic. However, we are going to skip that. Turn the page and go to number 4. Okay? Another law regarding the placement of Hanukkah lights. Amar Rav Kahana. Deresh Rav Natan Bar Manyumi Mishmei de Rabbi Tanfin. Turn the page. Okay? Ner shel Hanukkah she'inicha l'ma'ala me'esri mama. A Hanukkah light placed 20 amot above the ground. Pesula kesuka uchamavoy. Is invalid just like a sukkah and a mavoy. So it's just interesting that how high up can you place the Chanukiah? So if you live on the 4th floor of the apartment building and you're 50 or 60 amot in the air, do you place your Hanukkah menorah in the window? Or do you light it in your home inside? According to this, lighting it in the window doesn't do anything for you. Which is interesting because we tend to think of lights high up on buildings from far away being more and more and more visible. Because the purpose of putting it outside the home is Pirsuma Denisa, the advertising or the publicizing of the miracle, making the miracle well known. That's why, those who drive around with Hanukkah menorahs on top of their cars, they're doing that. Or you have an 8-foot menorah on the lawn. That's to proclaim the miracle, so that then the world is told of the fact of the miracle. Number 5.
So it doesn't matter if you're on the 8th floor, if you put it in the window.
You can put it in the window, I would say, but whether it says it's pasul, it says it's pasul, which is kind of crazy. It's invalid. You don't get credit for lighting. In that case, you can only get credit if you light it inside your home. I think that, I don't know what that means. Maybe that means somebody's got a 20 amot pole and they're lighting it way up there on top of the pole, right? Like the star on top of the Rockefeller Christmas tree, Lahavdil, right? You want to get it all the way up there like that outdoors in front of your house. Maybe that's what's not allowed. I think if you're in the apartment on the 20th floor, you get the light in the window, right? All right. Now, number 5. Another law regarding the placement of the Hanukkah lights, Amar Rabbah. Ner Chanukah mitzvah lahanicha batefach hasmucha lapetach. You are required to light the Hanukkah light within 1 tefach of the doorway of your house. Tefach is like a hand's breadth. So you got to do it right there. So if you have one of those, like I have, you have a little mailbox on the wall of your house right next to your front door, that's where the Hanukkah can go, like right there. But to walk down the stop to the mailbox on the post by the street, no good. It's got to be right by the opening of your house. So basically it goes door, mezuzah, Hanukkah, right? Okay, so where do you put it? I mean, a tefach above, a tefach to the left, a tefach to the right. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said on the right-hand side of the doorway going into the house. Rav Shmuel, midifte amar mi Shmuel, mismol. Rav Shmuel of Babylonia, Difti, said you do it on the left as you walk in. V'hilchata mi small, and the law is that Hanukkah light is placed on the left side. Kedei shetehei ner Chanukah mismol umizuzah miyamin. So the Hanukkah light can be on the opposite side of your door from your mezuzah. Okay, so they declare that to be that. Yeah, so ideally you put it in the front window where it's visible. If you have a window on either side of your door, ideally you would put it on the left side window as you walk in your front door. That's the ideal place for your Hanukkah. Right? We don't really have that. We've got curtains on there, so they'd go up in flame if I put anything on fire there. I don't have, yeah, so I have an electric Hanukkah that looks like flames flickering that I put in the front window of the house, right in the middle of the bay window, and we light inside. The candles are put into the menorah. I get this question every year. I don't know why, but I do. Okay, here's your menorah with your candles, right? So you put them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you light them this way, going that way. So you light the newest candle first, okay? So you put them in from right to left, you light them, newest candle first going back. And then you put your shamash there. Now, your Hanukkah, the shamash has to be the tallest. It has become fashionable in Orthodox circles to be absolutely strict that these 8 candles must be at the exact same height. Narishkai.
Of each other.
Of each other. That it's got to be either, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Underneath can be whatever, and then a shamash on one side, or a shamash in the middle, and they're all the same height. Narishkai. As long as the shamash is highest, these can be anything. Because remember, how many candles are you supposed to have? 1. So who cares if the other 7 you don't need are on its level or not, as long as your shamash is identifiable. You don't even need those candles. It doesn't matter what level they're on, right? I know. You can find books that people have written that say it's not kosher if they look like this.
That's the menorah here. Remember, Rabbi said it wasn't kosher. Some big menorah. I forgot which one.
Also, they gotta be in a straight line, not on a curve.
They don't. This is fine. This is 100% kosher. And I understand that you can find people who will say it has to be in a flat line. It doesn't have to be in a flat line as long as this is highest. Also, you can make this 3-dimensional. In your mind, put a hinge here, 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 and here, and rotate them.
That's neat.
Rotate them like the spheres of the planets going around the sun. And one can be out here, and one can be here, and one can be over here, and they can be different heights and different places front. As long as this one's highest, Rabbi Tobin says it's kosher.
Yeah, I never saw it.
But what you can't have is you can't have it rotate so that it is directly behind like bowling pins. 3 and 4 cannot be behind each other because they're inseparable. They have to be distinguishable. So when you look at it from outside, you're looking in the window, I need to see 8 lights and a shamash that's
Yeah,
higher.
but if you
But they can be farther and closer, and they can be higher and lower, as long as I see clearly 8 lights. There is a line in the Gemara that says you can't have them all in a common bowl because it's a mahadura.
but if
It's a lamp.
if you
Okay, and the problem with the lamp is that when you look at it side on, you have a light here and a light here, and then you have a light here, a light here, a light here, and behind it in the exact same place, a light here, a light here, a light here that you don't see. So when you have a mahadura, looking at it, it's not distinguishable. But you can have a round thing as long as they are distinguishable. Yeah.
If I take that and rotate it around the axis of symmetry, if you will, which would be the shamas, at some point they're going to be
Correct.
they're going to be 90 degrees.
If I take this and I turn it 90 degrees, what do I see?
You have one candle.
I see a shamash and a single candle
Right.
with 7 little soldier candles right behind it.
Yeah, but
So the concept that somehow from some angle it's not going to be kosher, well then nothing is kosher.
no.
The logic falls apart completely, right? So they say this is the easiest, so straight on, flat on, it's always clear and visible.
So you don't think there's a market for a laser alignment?
My son made a Hanukkah. They had a project, they studied the laws of Hanukkah at Schechter, and they all had to make their own Hanukkah. So he went to Home Goods and he bought a hinged box. Hinge, okay? And inside the box, okay, it's 3-dimensional. Got it? 3-dimensional, 3-dimensional. Inside the hinged box, he poured in modeling cement. Okay? So he filled this with modeling cement with a little mound higher than the rest of the flat surface of the modeling cement there. Okay? And he put a candle hole there, and he put a candle hole there, put a candle hole there, 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 and there. For a total of 9 candle holes, one of which was on the mound. And then he drew in the base paths.
I was gonna ask, was it a baseball one? As soon as you said mound.
Yankee Stadium's facade with people sitting in the stands and the pennants and championships in the top. And when you take it all out, you can simply close the box, which is a box like the size of a book now, and he painted it in pinstripes with the Yankee logo on it.
I think we know which son.
And his teacher gave him an F
We could look at it in one direction.
because this Israeli, it's always an Israeli who thinks they know halacha because they're Israeli, said, we studied that it has to be in a line, and anything that's not in a line is not kosher. And therefore, while you worked very hard, you didn't follow their directions, and this is not a kosher Hanukkah.
If you have a shortstop.
To which the teacher received a well-reasoned and fully footnoted 5-page paper from me with all of the citations and sources that that teacher was misreading and why. And I said, and finally, since when does Schechter tell students from so many different synagogues what is and is not kosher when their rabbis have told them differently? I received no response. The grade was changed to an A, probably just to make me go away. But quite frankly, that's brilliant.
Was
he a Red Sox fan?
Yankee fan.
No, I was a
Right?
teacher.
Like father likes.
But is that,
No,
That-
not the teacher.
right? So you've got what you need. They're distinguishable,
Yeah.
right? They're in clearly different places where they're not going to be viewed like this. Any way you look at that from any place, you can see all 9 players on the field. Anywhere you sit in a baseball stadium, you can see all 9 players on the field, right?
So does he still light it every year?
Hey, this is what he uses every year. This is his Hanukkah. It'll go to college with him.
Was the teacher of Boston, was the teacher of
The first candle is, the shamash is the pitcher.
No, I'm looking.
Oh, for the 8, so we light them in the order of the positions when you keep score. So the shamash is number 1, but then the catcher is next, the first baseman is next, second baseman is next, third baseman is next, then the shortstop.
Oh,
Because the position numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, and the shortstop is 5.
You go left field, right?
I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The shortstop is 6. When you keep score in the scorebook, the shortstop is position number 6.
oh, okay.
Then the left fielder is 7, the center fielder is 8, and the right fielder is 9.
That's brilliant.
So basically, it doesn't work the way you do it.
Well, I beg your
The
pardon?
picture was the,
It doesn't work the way you do the.
No, it
got
didn't.
it first, you put the first, second, third,
no,
fourth.
no.
Oh, because, because my shamash is number 1, because the pitcher is number 1. But,
No,
so-
You started out basically with third base was good.
because I'm not putting in from right to left and I'm going from left to right, correct. That we're not doing, but that's minhag, because how many candles am I supposed to have?
1.
1. So the order that you do it, like if I walked into someone's house and they put them in this order, I would not say, I'm sorry, you need to take them out and put them back in properly. Whereas if I walked into someone's house